When Blazing Saddles premiered in 1974, almost nobody expected it to become one of the most influential comedy films ever made. Studio executives worried it was too offensive. Critics weren't sure audiences would understand its razor-sharp satire. Even some of the people involved in making the film believed it might disappear after a short theatrical run. Instead, it became a cultural landmark that filmmakers still study decades later. But as generations of fans continued watching the movie, they noticed something unusual. Hidden among the outrageous jokes, brilliant performances, and unforgettable one-liners was a production mistake so unexpected that many viewers overlooked it for years. Unlike obvious continuity errors that immediately catch the eye, this one blended perfectly into the film's deliberately chaotic ending. Only after repeated viewings did fans begin asking the same question. Was this intentional, or did one of Hollywood's greatest comedies accidentally preserve a genuine blooper forever? To understand why that moment matters, you first have to understand the movie itself. By the early 1970s, the American Western had been one of Hollywood's most successful genres for decades. Heroes wore white hats, villains wore black, and the stories followed familiar patterns. Audiences knew exactly what to expect whenever another cowboy film reached theaters. Then came filmmaker Mel Brooks. Brooks had already earned a reputation for turning entire genres upside down. Rather than making traditional comedies filled with isolated jokes, he preferred taking well-known movie formulas and exposing how ridiculous many of them really were. With Blazing Saddles, he set his sights on the Western. But this wasn't simply a parody of cowboy movies. Beneath the outrageous humor was a serious examination of prejudice, stereotypes, and the myths Hollywood had helped create about the American frontier. The film follows Bart, a black railroad worker unexpectedly appointed sheriff of the all-white town of Rock Ridge. The appointment is designed to drive the townspeople away, allowing a corrupt politician and ruthless land developer to seize valuable property. Instead, Bart's intelligence, confidence, and courage expose the absurdity of the racism surrounding him. That premise alone made many studio executives nervous. Unlike earlier comedies that avoided controversial topics, Blazing Saddles confronted racism directly. Brooks believed that ridicule could be more powerful than lectures. Rather than glorifying prejudice, the film mocked it relentlessly, portraying bigotry as ignorant, irrational, and ultimately self-defeating. To help shape that vision, Brooks worked alongside several talented writers, including legendary comedian Richard Pryor. Pryor's contributions brought authenticity and sharp social observation to the screenplay. Although he hoped to play Sheriff Bart himself, concerns from the studio and insurance companies prevented that casting decision from becoming reality. Instead, the role went to Cleavon Little. Little approached the character with remarkable confidence. Rather than playing Bart as a victim, he portrayed him as the smartest person in nearly every room he entered. His calm reactions made the increasingly ridiculous situations around him even funnier, creating one of the most memorable comedy performances of the decade. The supporting cast proved equally important. Gene Wilder delivered one of his most beloved performances as the Waco Kid, a washed-up gunslinger whose dry wit perfectly complemented Little's understated style. Meanwhile, Harvey Korman embraced theatrical villainy as Hedley Lamar, while Madeline Kahn nearly stole every scene she appeared in through her hilarious parody of glamorous Hollywood singers. The chemistry between these performers transformed what could have been simple parody into something far more enduring. Production itself was anything but smooth. Several casting decisions changed at the last minute. Scenes evolved during filming as Brooks encouraged improvisation whenever actors discovered funnier ways to deliver dialogue. Rather than insisting every line remain exactly as written, he welcomed spontaneity, believing genuine comedy often appeared when performers felt free to experiment. That creative freedom gave Blazing Saddles much of its unforgettable energy. It also created an environment where unexpected moments sometimes found their way into the finished film. Some of those surprises became legendary comedy. Others remained hidden for decades, buried inside one of the most chaotic finales ever filmed. And among all of them was one strange mistake that viewers continue debating to this day: a moment so subtle that almost nobody noticed it during the movie's original theatrical release. Most people remember Blazing Saddles for its outrageous jokes, fearless satire, and completely unpredictable ending. But hidden within that unforgettable finale is a moment that has fascinated film fans for years. Unlike a forgotten line of dialogue or a continuity error involving costumes, this was something much stranger. A real-world mistake that somehow survived the editing room and became part of cinema history. To understand why it happened, you have to look at how Mel Brooks approached filmmaking. Unlike many directors who demanded absolute perfection, Mel Brooks believed comedy often became funnier when it felt slightly out of control. He encouraged actors to improvise, allowed scenes to evolve naturally, and wasn't afraid to keep unexpected moments if they made audiences laugh. His philosophy was simple. If something accidental improved the joke, why remove it? That approach shaped nearly every part of Blazing Saddles. One of the best examples is the now famous campfire sequence. Today it's considered one of the funniest scenes in movie history, but in 1974 it shocked audiences. Cowboys sitting around a fire after eating beans begin loudly passing gas, a joke that had rarely, if ever, been presented so openly in a major Hollywood film. Studio executives reportedly questioned whether audiences would reject such lowbrow humor, while Brooks believed the scene perfectly mocked the unrealistic image of the American cowboy. Instead of glamorous heroes riding into the sunset, these cowboys behaved like ordinary human beings. The audience loved it. The laughter during preview screenings was reportedly so intense that some dialogue became difficult to hear. Rather than reducing the sound effects, Brooks embraced the reaction. His willingness to ignore conventional rules became one of the defining reasons the film succeeded. But the biggest surprise arrived during the ending. Unlike traditional westerns that conclude with one final showdown before fading into the sunset, Blazing Saddles completely abandons reality. The climactic fight bursts through movie sets, crashes into other sound stages, spills across the Warner Brothers studio lot, and eventually reaches modern-day Hollywood. It remains one of the boldest fourth-wall-breaking finales ever filmed. And it's during this sequence that something completely unexpected appears. As actors race through the studio lot, cameras briefly capture a casually dressed man calmly walking through the frame. He isn't wearing a costume. He isn't reacting to the action. He doesn't appear to recognize that filming is taking place around him. For years, many viewers assumed he was simply another extra. But repeated viewings suggested something different. Unlike professional background performers, the man never interacts with the actors. He doesn't behave like someone following stage directions. Instead, he continues walking naturally, almost as if he accidentally wandered into the middle of production without realizing cameras were rolling. Whether he was an unsuspecting pedestrian or simply someone who wasn't intended to appear in that particular shot, the result looked completely authentic. Most directors would have ordered another take. Mel Brooks didn't. Instead, the unexpected appearance blended perfectly with the controlled chaos surrounding it. Because the ending intentionally destroys the illusion of the movie itself, the accidental walk-on somehow feels appropriate rather than distracting. That's why so many audiences missed it. The scene is already overflowing with visual comedy. Characters run in every direction. Movie sets collapse. Costumed actors collide with studio employees. The camera rarely pauses long enough for viewers to examine every detail. Only after fans began watching the film repeatedly on home video did people start noticing the mysterious figure crossing through the background. Whether Brooks deliberately left the moment untouched or simply decided it wasn't worth replacing, it became one of the film's most interesting production stories. Ironically, that wasn't the only unexpected change the movie experienced. Several scenes audiences know today almost looked completely different. Before filming began, Richard Pryor had hoped to play Sheriff Bart himself. Because insurance concerns prevented that casting, Cleveland Lill stepped into the role and ultimately delivered the performance that helped define the entire movie. Another major change involved the character of the Waco Kid. The role originally belonged to Academy Award-winning actor Gig Young. However, after production began, Personal struggles prevented him from continuing with the film. Mel Brooks quickly contacted Gene Wilder, who accepted the role on extremely short notice. Looking back today, it's difficult to imagine anyone else playing the part. Wilder's quiet delivery created the perfect contrast to the increasingly ridiculous world surrounding him. His chemistry with Cleveland Little became one of the emotional anchors of the movie, giving audiences characters they genuinely cared about amid the non-stop absurdity. Sometimes filmmaking depends on careful planning. Other times, it depends on embracing unexpected events. For Blazing Saddles, both proved equally important. And as remarkable as those happy accidents were, some of the biggest surprises happened before audiences ever entered the theater, when Warner Brothers executives seriously questioned whether the film should even be released at all. By the time Blazing Saddles was finished, many people inside Hollywood believed it had gone too far. The script challenged long-standing traditions, mocked nearly every Western cliché, and pushed comedy into territory that major studios had rarely explored. While the cast believed they had created something special, executives at Warner Brothers weren't nearly as confident. They worried that audiences would reject the film completely, leaving the studio with an expensive disaster. Those concerns weren't entirely surprising. During production, Mel Brooks had earned a reputation for encouraging his actors to experiment. Instead of demanding that every scene follow the script exactly, he welcomed improvisation whenever someone discovered a funnier approach. This freedom created an atmosphere unlike most Hollywood productions. Actors constantly tested new jokes, adjusted their timing, and reacted naturally to one another, giving the film an energy that felt spontaneous rather than rehearsed. That creative style also meant some memorable moments happened completely by accident. One of the biggest production changes came before filming had even settled into a rhythm. The role of the Waco Kid had originally been given to Academy Award winner Gig Young. On paper, the casting seemed perfect. Young possessed the rugged appearance and experience needed for the character. Unfortunately, personal struggles made it impossible for him to continue filming. After only a short time, production was forced to stop while Brooks searched for a replacement. The solution arrived almost immediately. Brooks contacted Gene Wilder, whom he had previously directed in The Producers. Wilder quickly agreed to join the project, reportedly arriving with very little preparation time before cameras started rolling again. Looking back, that unexpected casting decision became one of the greatest strokes of luck in the film's history. Wilder approached the Waco Kid differently than most actors would have. Rather than making the character loud or exaggerated, he played him with quiet confidence and subtle humor. His calm delivery created the perfect contrast to the increasingly ridiculous events happening around him. Together, Wilder and Cleveland Little developed an effortless chemistry that became one of the emotional foundations of the entire movie. Meanwhile, another fascinating story surrounded the film's opening theme. Mel Brooks wanted audiences to believe they were about to watch a traditional Western epic. To achieve that effect, he hired legendary singer Frankie Laine, whose powerful voice had become closely associated with classic cowboy films. Brooks reportedly instructed Laine to perform the song with complete sincerity. The result was brilliant. While the lyrics gently mocked Western cliches, Laine sang every word as though he were introducing the greatest frontier adventure ever filmed. That contrast made the joke even stronger. Another unforgettable moment involved the Native American scene early in the movie. When Sheriff Bard encounters a tribe whose chief unexpectedly speaks fluent Yiddish, many viewers are caught completely off guard. Brooks himself played the tribal chief, using the scene to parody the unrealistic way Native Americans had often been portrayed in older Hollywood westerns. Rather than mocking indigenous cultures, the joke targeted the artificial stereotypes created by decades of filmmaking. Throughout production, Brooks constantly looked for ways to surprise audiences. He believed comedy worked best when viewers couldn't predict what would happen next. That philosophy eventually led to one of the most ambitious endings ever attempted in a comedy. Instead of keeping the action inside the fictional town of Rock Ridge, the final battle explodes across the Warner Brothers studio lot, crashes into other movie sets, and eventually spills into the real world itself. It was during this elaborate sequence that the film's most famous blooper quietly slipped into history. As actors race across the studio grounds, a casually dressed man briefly appears walking through the shot. He doesn't seem connected to the production. He isn't dressed like anyone else in the scene, and he doesn't react to the chaos unfolding around him. Many fans believe he was simply an unsuspecting passerby who wandered into the frame while cameras continued rolling. Whether that explanation is completely accurate remains uncertain. What is certain is that the moment remained in the finished film. Brooks never removed it, perhaps because it fit perfectly with the movie's intentionally chaotic ending. In a film where fictional characters literally escape their own story and invade a Hollywood studio, one unexpected person crossing the frame somehow feels completely natural. That accidental moment has become one of the most discussed visual curiosities in Blazing Saddles. Some viewers still miss it entirely, while others enjoy spotting it every time they revisit the film. Ironically, despite all the studio's fears, none of these unusual decisions would prevent the movie from becoming one of the greatest comedy successes in Hollywood history. When Blazing Saddles finally reached theaters in February 1974, few people expected what happened next. Despite concerns from studio executives, audiences immediately embraced the film. Word of mouth spread quickly, and theaters that had planned only short runs suddenly found themselves selling out show after show. Instead of becoming a forgotten experiment, Blazing Saddles became one of the highest-grossing comedies of its era and cemented Mel Brooks as one of Hollywood's boldest comedy directors. More importantly, the movie proved that satire could tackle difficult subjects without losing its sense of humor. Unlike many comedies that simply chase laughs, Blazing Saddles used comedy as a weapon against prejudice. Rather than celebrating racist attitudes, it exposed how ridiculous they were. That message helped the film endure long after many other 1970s comedies faded from popular memory. Of course, no legendary movie escapes scrutiny forever. As high-definition home video, streaming services, and online fan communities grew, viewers began examining every frame more closely than audiences ever could in 1974. Tiny continuity errors, improvised moments, and production mistakes suddenly became easier to spot. Fans debated whether certain scenes were carefully planned or simply fortunate accidents left untouched by the editors. The so-called huge blooper became part of that conversation. The brief appearance of an unexpected figure during the chaotic studio lot finale fascinated movie lovers because it perfectly matched the spirit of the film. Whether it was a genuine production mistake or simply an unscripted moment Brooks decided to keep, it represented exactly what made Blazing Saddles different from ordinary Hollywood comedies. Instead of chasing perfection, Brooks embraced unpredictability. That same philosophy can be seen throughout the film. Actors occasionally delivered lines differently than originally written. Reactions that looked spontaneous often were. Brooks believed genuine laughter couldn't always be planned, so he encouraged performers to follow their instincts whenever inspiration struck. The result was a movie that still feels remarkably fresh decades later. Another reason for the film's lasting success is its remarkable cast. Cleavon Little brought intelligence, dignity, and confidence to Sheriff Bart, ensuring the character was never reduced to a simple punchline. Gene Wilder added warmth and understated humor as the Waco Kid, while Harvey Korman and Madeline Kahn delivered unforgettable comedic performances that remain fan favorites today. Behind the camera, Mel Brooks never viewed Blazing Saddles as merely a collection of outrageous jokes. He often explained that the film's real target wasn't any race or culture. It was ignorance itself. By making bigotry look foolish instead of powerful, he hoped audiences would laugh at prejudice rather than accept it. That balance between outrageous comedy and meaningful social commentary is one of the reasons the film continues to be discussed in classrooms, film studies programs, and documentaries nearly 50 years after its release. Even today, many younger viewers discover the movie for the first time and are surprised by how modern many of its filmmaking techniques feel. The fourth wall-breaking finale influenced countless later comedies. Its fearless blend of satire and slapstick helped inspire filmmakers who wanted to challenge traditional storytelling. Movies and television series that openly acknowledge the audience or parody their own genres owe at least part of their creative DNA to what Brooks accomplished in 1974. And what about that famous blooper? Perhaps the most fitting answer is that it doesn't really matter whether it was intentional or accidental. In a film built around chaos, unpredictability, and breaking every cinematic rule, an unexpected person wandering into the frame somehow becomes